The damage that leads to Alzheimer's disease begins approximately 20 years before any symptom appears. 20 years, which means the time to protect your brain is not after memory starts slipping. It is not after a diagnosis is made. It is not in your 80s or your 70s or even necessarily your 60s. It is now. And here is the most important scientific development in this space. In May 2025, the FDA cleared a blood test that can detect Alzheimer's biological markers before any symptom appears. The research confirmed what neurologists have understood for years. The biology of dementia is underway for decades before anyone notices, which means the interventions with the greatest impact are the ones taken during that same 2-decade window, before the damage becomes visible, before the symptoms arrive, right now. Today, I am going to walk you through a 10-minute daily routine designed specifically around the 3 primary biological mechanisms that drive dementia. Not generic wellness advice, the specific mechanisms with the research behind each one, and the specific habit that targets each mechanism in minutes 0 through 10 of every day. To understand why this routine works, you need to understand what dementia actually is at the biological level. Because dementia is not one process, it is 3 converging ones. The first is chronic brain inflammation, low-grade, persistent neuroinflammation that slowly disrupts how brain cells communicate and accelerates the accumulation of the toxic proteins, amyloid and tau, that define Alzheimer's pathology. The second is the decline of a molecule called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF for short. This is the brain's primary repair and growth signal. It drives the formation of new neurons, strengthens existing synaptic connections, and maintains the hippocampus, the structure that forms memories and that Alzheimer's attacks first. When BDNF levels fall, the brain loses its ability to adapt and recover. The third is impaired cerebral blood flow, a gradual reduction in the delivery of oxygen and glucose to the brain's most energy-demanding regions, the same regions where Alzheimer's pathology concentrates. Without adequate blood flow, neurons are starved. Waste clearance fails. The conditions for accelerated neurodegeneration are set. 3 mechanisms, 3 points of biological vulnerability, and this routine targets all 3 specifically. Subscribe now and help Dr. Manu Jones reach the people who need this most. One belief worth addressing before we begin. The belief that protecting your brain from dementia requires expensive treatments, genetic good fortune, or decades of perfect lifestyle choices that most people cannot realistically maintain. The reality, supported by the 2024 Lancet Commission, the most rigorous meta-analysis of dementia prevention evidence ever published, is different. Approximately 45% of all dementia cases are attributable to 14 modifiable risk factors. Modifiable, changeable, within your control, and several of those risk factors are directly addressed by what the next 25 minutes covers. The routine takes 10 minutes. The explanation takes the rest of this video because I want you to understand the mechanism. Because understanding why something works is what makes it a sustainable habit rather than a temporary attempt. Let us begin. The first element, 2 minutes. Starting every morning. Element 1 takes the first 2 minutes of the 10. The mechanics: sit or stand comfortably. Breathe in slowly through your nose for 4 full seconds, then breathe out slowly through your mouth for 8 full seconds, twice as long as the inhale. Repeat this for 2 minutes. That is approximately 7 to 8 breath cycles. This sounds simple. What is happening in your nervous system during those 2 minutes is not simple at all. The vagus nerve mechanism. The vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the body. It runs from the brainstem down through the neck, through the chest, and deep into the abdomen. It is the primary communication line of what scientists call the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch of the autonomic nervous system responsible for the rest and repair state, the counterbalance to the fight or flight response. When you extend your exhale beyond your inhale, when the out-breath is longer than the in-breath, you are directly and specifically activating the vagus nerve. The diaphragmatic movement of the extended exhale stimulates the vagal branches that run through the chest, sending a signal up to the brainstem and activating what is called the vagal brake, a parasympathetic response that shifts the body's entire nervous system toward recovery. This is not a metaphor. It is a documented physiological pathway. The connection to brain inflammation. In 2002, Kevin Tracy published a landmark paper in Nature establishing what is now called the inflammatory reflex. The vagus nerve, when activated, releases acetylcholine, a neurotransmitter, at the spleen and at immune tissues throughout the body. Acetylcholine directly suppresses the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines, the chemical signals that drive inflammation. This pathway operates in the brain as well. Research by Bott and colleagues demonstrated that vagal stimulation reduces neuroinflammation markers, specifically the inflammatory activity that contributes to amyloid accumulation and synaptic disruption in Alzheimer's disease. Chronic neuroinflammation is not a side effect of dementia. It is one of its primary drivers. The inflammatory environment in the brain accelerates the production and accumulation of amyloid plaques. impairs the glymphatic clearance system that removes those plaques during sleep, and disrupts the communication between neurons that memory and cognition depend on. 2 minutes of extended exhale breathing activates the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve activates the inflammatory reflex. The inflammatory reflex suppresses the neuroinflammatory cascade daily. How to do this correctly? The ratio matters. 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. If 4 and 8 is too long initially, 3 seconds in and 6 seconds out preserves the ratio. The extended exhale is the mechanism, not the specific count, but the length relationship between inhale and exhale. Breathe through the nose on the inhale, through the mouth on the exhale. Keep the exhale slow and controlled. Not forced, not a sigh, not a rush of breath. A controlled, steady release over the full 8 seconds. Do this for 2 full minutes before anything else in the morning, before coffee, before checking the phone, before the day imposes its demands. 2 minutes seated at the same time each morning. This is element 1. It targets the first biological driver of dementia, brain inflammation, through the vagal anti-inflammatory pathway. In part 2 of this video, element 2, 7 minutes, the most important and most underestimated component in this entire routine, and the one that produces the greatest measurable change in brain biology. In part 1 of this video, we covered element 1, the 2-minute breathing exercise that activates the vagus nerve and suppresses the neuroinflammatory cascade that drives Alzheimer's pathology. Element 2 takes minutes 3 through 9 of the routine, 7 minutes, and it addresses the second primary biological driver of dementia, the decline of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the brain's most important repair signal. Why walking alone is not enough. Most people with an interest in brain health know that physical exercise is good for the brain. Walking in particular, consistent, sustained aerobic movement, is associated with preserved cognitive function in older adults and has been studied more extensively than almost any other lifestyle intervention in neurology. But here's the specific scientific finding that most brain health content never covers, and that changes the implementation of this recommendation entirely. Walking while simultaneously performing a mental task produces dramatically greater brain benefit than walking alone. Not modestly greater. Dramatically greater. This is called dual task training, the concurrent engagement of motor and cognitive systems, and the mechanism behind its superiority over single task exercise is specific and measurable. The BDNF mechanism, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, is the brain's primary growth and repair molecule. It drives neurogenesis in the hippocampus, the formation of new neurons in the precise region Alzheimer's disease attacks first. It strengthens synaptic connections. It maintains the plasticity of neural networks that allows the brain to adapt and recover from damage. Research by Kirk Erickson and colleagues at the University of Pittsburgh, published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2011, showed that 6 months of aerobic exercise increased hippocampal volume by approximately 2% in older adults, in the same group that was showing hippocampal shrinkage in the control condition. BDNF is the mechanism. Exercise triggers its production, and the hippocampus responds measurably. A decline in BDNF is one of the most consistent findings in Alzheimer's disease research. Lower BDNF levels correlate with faster cognitive decline, smaller hippocampal volume, and greater amyloid burden. Restoring BDNF, through the interventions that specifically drive its production, is one of the most evidence-backed approaches to neurological protection available. Why dual-task walking multiplies the benefit? When you walk, the motor cortex and cerebellum are primarily engaged. When you perform a mental task, counting, recalling, categorizing, the prefrontal cortex, temporal lobes, and hippocampus are simultaneously recruited. When you do both at the same time, these systems are forced into real-time coordination. The neural demand of managing 2 tasks simultaneously, motor and cognitive, produces significantly larger BDNF release than either task alone. The brain responds to demand. When the demand is higher, the adaptive response is stronger. Research published in the Annals of Internal Medicine studying dual task training in older adults found that this form of exercise significantly outperformed standard walking for brain health outcomes and was independently associated with reduced dementia risk over the follow-up period. This is not a small distinction. For the same 7 minutes, the biological return is substantially higher when you add the cognitive component. The implementation. Walk at a comfortable, sustained pace for 7 minutes. The pace should be moderate, slightly more than a casual stroll. If you can hold a conversation without effort, you are in the right zone. While walking, maintain one of the following mental tasks continuously throughout. Count backwards from 100 in increments of 7. 100, 93, 86, 79, continuously, without stopping. The error correction when you lose track is part of the cognitive demand. Name one item in a specific category with every step. Animals, cities, foods, historical figures. One item per step, new item each time, no repeats. Alternate letters and numbers continuously, A1, B2, C3, through the full alphabet and back. The switching between number and letter systems is the cognitive demand. Recite something from memory, a prayer, a poem, a speech, a set of facts, continuously and from memory without reference. The task does not need to be difficult, it needs to be active and continuous. The moment the mental task becomes passive, the moment you can walk and do it without thinking, the dual task benefit diminishes. If a task becomes too easy, switch to a harder one or a new category. Do not use headphones for music or podcasts during these 7 minutes. Passive listening does not produce the cognitive demand required for dual task benefit. If you want audio, use spoken material that requires you to actively track and process content. An audiobook at a pace requiring attention, a language learning program, or a lecture that demands engagement. Walking outside in morning light is ideal. The circadian benefit from morning sun exposure is an additional documented contribution to sleep quality and neurological health. Inside your home, around a neighborhood, or on a treadmill all count. The location matters less than the consistency. For yourself, 7 minutes of dual task walking done daily is a more powerful hippocampal intervention than 30 minutes of mindless walking 3 times per week. Specificity changes outcomes. For a loved one, dual task walking is appropriate for most older adults and can be adapted to any mobility level. Seated cognitive exercises combined with upper body movement can produce similar dual task demand for those with limited ambulation. A physical therapist can adapt this specifically. This is element 2. It targets the second primary biological driver of dementia, the decline of BDNF and the progressive loss of hippocampal volume and cognitive reserve. In part 3 of this video, element 3, 1 minute. The mechanism behind it will surprise you. Then the complete 10-minute sequence and everything you need to implement all 3 starting tomorrow morning. In part 2, we covered element 2, dual task walking, and why the concurrent engagement of motor and cognitive systems produces dramatically greater BDNF release than walking alone, directly protecting hippocampal volume. Element 3 takes the final minute of the routine, and the mechanism behind it is one most people have never heard connected to brain health. The third element of this routine is 1 minute of humming. I understand that this sounds unusual. The research behind it is not unusual at all. The nitric oxide mechanism. Nitric oxide is a molecule produced throughout the body with a specific function in blood vessel regulation. It signals the smooth muscle cells lining blood vessel walls to relax. When smooth muscle relaxes, the vessel dilates. Blood flow increases. In the brain, this matters critically. The brain accounts for approximately 2% of body weight and consumes approximately 20% of the body's total blood flow. It is the most blood-dependent organ in the body. The regions most vulnerable to Alzheimer's pathology, the hippocampus, the entorhinal cortex, the prefrontal cortex, are also among the most metabolically demanding structures in the brain. They require consistent, adequate blood flow to maintain the oxygen and glucose delivery that neuronal function depends on. Impaired cerebral blood flow is the third primary driver of dementia we identified in part 1. Reduced blood flow to brain tissue accelerates amyloid accumulation, impairs the brain's glymphatic waste clearance system, and starves neurons of the metabolic support they need to maintain healthy function. Nitric oxide counteracts this directly. By signaling cerebral blood vessels to dilate, nitric oxide increases cerebral perfusion, the delivery of blood to brain tissue, through the same mechanism by which it lowers systemic blood pressure throughout the rest of the body. The nasal mechanism and why humming specifically matters. Your nasal passages and sinuses are lined with cells, including bacteria in the paranasal sinuses, that produce nitric oxide when air flows through them. Normal nasal breathing generates a modest, continuous amount of nasal nitric oxide. This is one of the documented benefits of nasal over mouth breathing. Humming creates oscillating airflow in the nasal passages and sinuses. The alternating pressure from the humming vibration dramatically increases the airflow cycling through the sinus lining, and with it, the release of nitric oxide. Research published in the American Journal of Respiratory and Critical Care Medicine by Weitzberg and Lundberg found that humming increased nasal nitric oxide production by up to 15 times compared to normal quiet breathing. 15 times, from 1 minute of humming. That surge of nitric oxide enters the bloodstream, reaches the cerebral circulation, and produces the vasodilatory signal that increases cerebral blood flow, targeting precisely the third biological vulnerability that this routine is designed to address. How to implement. After the 7-minute dual task walk is complete, hum continuously for 1 minute, a single sustained note. The pitch does not matter. The consistency and duration of the humming matters. The continuous airflow through the sinuses is the mechanism. If you prefer, hum the final minute of the walk itself. Humming while walking at a moderate pace, without the simultaneous cognitive task, still produces the nitric oxide benefit and shortens the total time commitment by overlapping the 2 activities. This is element 3, 1 minute. Targeting cerebral blood flow through the nitric oxide signaling pathway. the complete routine, start to finish. Minutes 0 through 2, the breathing exercise. 4 seconds in through the nose, 8 seconds out through the mouth. Approximately 7 to 8 complete breath cycles, seated or standing, before anything else in the morning. Minutes 3 through 9, dual task walking. A sustained, moderate pace with one continuous cognitive task running throughout. Counting backwards, naming items in categories, alternating letters and numbers, reciting from memory, 7 full minutes. Outside in morning light where possible. Minute 10, humming. 1 continuous minute of humming at any comfortable pitch after the walk is complete, or overlapping with the final minute of walking. 10 minutes, 3 elements, 3 biological mechanisms, daily. Each element addresses one of the 3 primary biological vulnerabilities that dementia research has identified, but they do not operate independently. The breathing exercise reduces neuroinflammation, which means the lymphatic clearance system operates more efficiently during sleep, removing more amyloid and tau with each night. The dual task walking raises BDNF levels, which means the hippocampal neurons that survive longer have greater capacity to form and maintain connections. The humming increases cerebral blood flow, which means the delivery of oxygen and glucose to those same vulnerable neurons is better sustained throughout the day. 3 converging protections, each one meaningful alone. Together, they address the same biological system from 3 different angles simultaneously. The 2024 Lancet Commission identified 14 modifiable risk factors for dementia. Physical inactivity is on that list. Cardiovascular risk is on that list. The underlying inflammation and vascular health that this routine directly targets are the biological pathways through which those risk factors operate. This routine does not add new complexity to your morning. It addresses the biology those risk factors exploit. The reason these 10 minutes matter is not that any single element is revolutionary on its own. It is that the damage behind dementia is cumulative and begins decades before symptoms. And protection against cumulative damage is itself cumulative. 10 minutes done once produces a biological response for hours. 10 minutes done daily produces an adaptive response over months. 10 minutes done consistently over years, building into the habitual automatic part of a morning, is the intervention with the greatest measurable long-term impact on the biological systems this disease targets. The 2024 Lancet Commission established that nearly half of all dementia cases are potentially preventable by addressing modifiable risk factors. The window to address them is the 2 decades before symptoms appear. Most people are in that window right now. 10 minutes, 3 elements starting tomorrow morning. One question in the comments. Which of the 3 elements surprised you most? The breathing, the walking method, or the humming? And which one are you going to try first? Tell me both. I read every comment and every answer shapes what this channel covers next. If this gave someone in your life a practical starting point for protecting their brain, share it. 10 minutes a day is an easier conversation to start than most. Subscribe for new videos every Tuesday and Friday.